or I hope you did not wake up in the middle of the night to assist this. I secretly do. I hope you've had a pleasant day and that the New Year's has kicked off the right way for you guys. It's been a while since we hosted a webinar, and it's been a while since I've seen your face, Sergio.
Yes, Lisa.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, most fine.
How was Christmas? Good?
Oh, good, lots of food, and now I'm trying to get on diet, but it's not easy, you know.
I hope dieting is on everyone's resolution. Here today, Lisa Garrido and Sergio Freire, your trusty team members from Xray here at Expand IT, going to deliver an Xray product walkthrough webinar for server, guys. This is not the cloud version. It's for server. So
We got mid of this month, and it includes many new features, and I can share some with you. So if you already tried out Xray, you can have also a better understanding of the current things that we delivered. So let me share a bit of our release notes with you. And just to mention, although this is not a webinar for version 3.3, if you guys already tried out Xray version through or an earlier version, you can find out that Xray 3.3 includes additional things such as the ability to move data between projects, between in this case, between Jira instances. So if you already have some project configured in one, let's say, staging environment, you can move the data from there into the production environment. We also have a built-in migration utility for Zephyr, and so you can take advantage of Xray right away.
I think that's the best part right there. Also, these features seem to be super convenient in terms of moving data around, especially those of you that are itching to get off of Zephyr.
And well, besides it, we also enhanced some of our gadgets. And I want also to mention that we enhanced the integration that we have with Structure, so we can now manage, for example, test executions right below the test plans and see them in a hierarchical way. But there is more, and there are also some additional improvements for the traceability, where you can easily filter out requirements based on their coverage status. So, for example, you can see the requirements, just the ones that are having issues, or the ones that are, for example, uncovered. And we also have a flattened view for the traceability report, so you can see all the requirements, no matter if they are, for example, epics or stories. But there is much more in that version, including many performance improvements. That's some work that we have been doing for some time, and we always try to improve the product. So if you start using Xray, for sure you get all these kinds of improvements in a continuous way.
That's great. I'll be sharing with you guys the link to these release notes. That way you can just read those extra features that Sergio did not point out. Today's server webinar, however, is just our regular product walkthrough to display the key features that Xray has to those that are new to Xray and to those that are already using the tool and they just want to get a little bit more knowledge. So I'll definitely be pushing our marketing team a little bit to see if we can do a 3.3, because I think it would be really interesting. Don't you think?
Yes, I think so.
I think so as well. Some housekeeping notes before we get started. So questions, we'll reserve some time, if we have time, towards the end of the webinar to answer a few of your questions. However, if we don't answer them in time, don't worry. I'm going to give Sergio homework, and then I'll send everyone an email with the recording of the session. Yes, we are recording the webinar, and also all the questions that were asked. That way everyone can see, you know, and I'm pretty sure everyone's going to have some questions, and that way you'll see their answers. Now, a little bit of background information if you're new to our webinar. We've been making kick-ass software for more than 4 years with more than 4,000 customers that are using both our apps and trust our apps. We are present in over 65 countries. And pretty cool part, we have offices in 3 different countries, including the US, but it's a small office, so don't get it too excited yet. And the best part is that we have delivered in 2018 alone over 123 features. Is that right, Sergio? That's
Yes,
a lot of work.
Yes.
That's a lot of work.
Sure.
Cool. Moving forward, let's not forget that aside from Xray, we are also the creators for Exporter. So what is Exporter? It is another app for Jira software and also Jira Service Desk that allows you to create customizable reports and extract them from Jira. We know that there are some limitations with the things that you can export using the internal or the built-in exporter it has. So Exporter gives you the ability to take information from your Jira issues and extract them into a Word, Excel, PDF, even rich text format. Exporter also integrates with Xray, so you're also able to put the power of Exporter into your test management and create these extractable reports that you can share with other members of your team or your organization. These are just a few of the customers that trust Expand IT and using both our apps. Just pointing some out there, we got Samsung, we got folks like Mercedes-Benz, Inditex, Deutsche Telekom, and a few others. Now, I leave it with you, Sergio.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
I have the toughest work, you know.
Of course.
But it's always a pleasure to be here with you. So once again, really thanks for attending our webinar. I really hope you enjoy it. The aim of this webinar is to give you an overview of the main features of Xray. We won't have time to explore all features in detail, but you will get an idea of what Xray allows you to do in terms of task management. And the best way to learn all about Xray is by using it. So we do have a sandbox environment that you can use to try it out, or you can even download a trial to your local Jira instance. Finally, just to say once again that we will reserve some amount of time in hand, so we are able to clarify some of your questions. And if that's not enough, we'll contact you afterwards and try to answer all of you. So let's start by looking at our agenda today. So first of all, I will be talking about what are requirements from the Xray point of view, and then I will be creating actually one. In this case, it will be a user story, and I will validate that user story. I will cover it with 3 different types of tests that Xray supports. I will then introduce the precondition entity as a means for complementing the description, the specification of your test cases. Moving ahead into the organization part, Xray actually is quite flexible, as you will see. It does not dictate the way that you should work, because that is something that you can internally define with your team members, the best way how you want to work. So we give you possibilities. So, and in terms of organization, we provide this flat way for organizing tests in lists that we call test sets. Complementarily, or as an alternative, you can use the test repository, which is an hierarchical approach, and we'll see both of them during the demo session today. Then I will be creating a plan in order to validate my version with the tests that I've created, and from there I will be scheduling 2 test executions. I will be both executing manual and automated tests. And unfortunately, we don't have the time that we would need in order to deep dive on the automation topic, but I will speak a bit about it during the demo today, so you can have like a high-level understanding of what Xray offers you. Then finally, moving into the reporting part, I will try to speak a bit about the different possibilities that Xray provides in terms of reporting. And of course, we also, as you will see, we also provide other ways for you to make reporting using other top-notch add-ons, including Exporter and EasyBI. Okay, so let's move ahead, and let me jump into a sample project that I have, where I basically will start by showing you the administration. So let me just share it with you. Okay, here we go. So before we start creating the user stories, the first thing that I need to mention is that Xray is quite a flexible tool. So it provides you a bunch of settings that allow you to fine-tune how it behaves. And from all of these settings, that of course by default they are already filled out with some values that make sense, but if you want, you can fine-tune them. From these settings, the one that is most important one, at least to configure on an initial stage, is the issue type mapping, because this is the place where you can see all the available issue types, and you can define the ones that should be handled as requirements. To be honest, these kind of issues are issues that can be covered with test cases. So you can think of them as being epic stories, your own custom issue types. So if you want, you can even make test coverage for bug issue types if you drag it to the requirement issue types column here. And the defect issue types is where you can see all the issue types that you wish to handle as being defects. So later on, you can create them from the execution, and well, this configuration is important because it will affect the behavioral tool whenever you are working with this kind of issue types across the tool. For example, for the issue types that are configured as being requirements, we can then cover them with test cases directly from the screen of the issue. Okay. So let me jump into a sample project that I have, which is a sample calculator project. It's a dummy project just for showing you the concepts. And I will start by creating a user story first, which will be our requirement. As you well remember, I've configured the issue type story to handle as a coverable entity, a requirement. So let's say as a user that I can calculate the sum of two numbers, and let's say that this is target against version 3.0. Let me open the screen. So the screen actually is the traditional user story screen in this case. The only difference here is that you can see right away that there's a custom field here, which is named required status, that provides you the current coverage status for the user story. So by looking at it, you know right away that the user story is uncovered for version 3. So it's just a way for you to quickly evaluate the coverage right from the user story screen. Then there's this test coverage panel where you can see all the test cases that cover our user story. And well, the next step is to actually create the test cases in order to validate it. So how can we do that? We can actually do it on two different ways. One, by using the top create button there, and another one by using the create new test action within the test coverage panel. The only difference if you do it from here is that the test case will automatically be linked to the user story. So you don't have to link it by hand. So let's start by creating a manual test first. Well, the first thing that you already notice is that the test case is abstracted as an issue type named tests. In fact, our entities, most of them, they are abstracted as different issue types. So we have the test, which is an abstraction of a test case template, just related with the specification. Then we can complement it with preconditions as the means to define like the initial condition that your test must assure. Then you can group your tests in lists. We call those lists test sets, and there are also going to be issues within your project. And then moving into the planning phase, we have the test plan as a means to define the test planning, the scope for, let's say, for a given version, in terms of testing, the test that you wish to execute in the context, let's say, of a version or even of a sprint. And then from the test plan, you can actually schedule multiple iterations, multiple tasks for running one or more test cases. We call those tasks test executions. So why are we using issue types? Well, because first of all, I think we are currently the only tool that works this way. But we followed this approach from the start since Xray was born about 5 years ago, because we wanted to use the same kind of concepts that Xray provides. And by abstracting our entities in issue types, that means that you can take advantage of many things out of the box, such as the ability to add custom fields to any of them, the ability also to customize the screens, to even implement workflows if you want to have like fine control over the specification or over the execution or even over the planning. And also, if you want to integrate with other apps and search for these issues, it will be straightforward. And the way that you deal with permissions is also seamless because it works in the same way as it works for any other issue type within Jira. And another thing that our customers love is also that sometimes you want to have like these entities all within the same project, or sometimes you want to split them between different projects. For example, you may want to have like a project just with like the user stories and the bugs, and another project for storing the testing related artifacts. And that is possible with Xray, because actually since they are issues, you can actually store them where you want to, and you can still relate with entities that are stored in some other project. Okay, so let's proceed creating our manual test first. And well, I should fill out the summary, also the description to define like the scope of my tests. And I would also advise you to set the components and the labels, because these are like the natural way for you to mark entities within Jira. So it is going to be easier for you to find this test case afterwards by using those fields. Then within the test details, you can see that the test can either be manual, cucumber, or generic. I will be creating the 3 different types, don't worry. And I will start first of all with a manual test. You can fill out the steps from this dialog, but actually I will leave this step creation to the test screen because I can actually do more operations there. Then I can link my test case with some existing entities such as test sets, preconditions, and test plans. I will skip this for now because I want to focus on how the association between our user story and our test case happens. And once again, we reuse the Jira way for relating issues. So we have a special link type named test that tells you that a given test validates or that covers some requirement. In fact, a test case may cover one or more requirements, and a given requirement may be covered by one or more test cases. So let's create it and let's have a look at it. Well, from the test issue screen that you can see here, you can see that a test is also identified by the issue key, of course, because our test case is abstracted as an issue within Jira. And then once again, have in mind that the test case for Xray means a test case template. So it's a reusable entity just related with specification. Then moving a bit down on the screen, you can see all the steps that my test has. Then you can fill out the steps using either a visual editor or inline Jira markup. You can also import steps from another test case from a CSV file or even from the clipboard. So that's actually what I'm going to do in order to gain some time and also to show you this nice feature. So let's say that you already have some steps already filled out in Excel sheet. You could simply do a copy and then come into Xray and then do a paste from the clipboard, and Xray will automatically create the steps for you. Awesome. As I said, you can use the visual editor if you wish to format the steps. You can also add attachments at step level. For example, let's add a picture here. You can embed steps on the expected. You can embed attachments on the expected result or on the action on the step column using the visual editor. Moving a bit down. Another thing that you can see here is all the related entities with our test case. So you can see, for example, all the preconditions that this test requires, all the test sets, all the test plans where this test is part of, and then the runs. I will take this opportunity right away to introduce a precondition. So let's say that you have one or in fact a bunch of test cases that do require the same initial condition. So for example, this can be like a certain logged in user, for example. So instead of having to write that down in all the test cases, you can abstract it in a reusable entity that we call the precondition. And the given test case may contain or may be related with 0, 1, or more preconditions. And actually, if you have more than one, you can define the order of them here. The beauty of preconditions is that you can reuse them across multiple test cases. So if you need to update later on, you just need to update it in one place. So let's say that in our case, we need the calculator turned on. Then in the precondition details, you can see that the precondition can either be manual, cucumber, or generic. If you want to link a precondition to a given test case, they have to be of the same type. And then you have this conditions field, which is an open field where you actually specify the initial condition. Turn on the calculator. And since I've created the precondition from the test issue screen, then it is linked automatically with our test case. You can see here that our test case now requires one precondition. So let me open the precondition now. From the precondition screen, there is also, you can see that the precondition is also identified by the issue key. You can see all the test cases that are using it. You can associate it with further test cases if you want. Coming back to our manual test, just to show you the last section of the UI here, which is the test runs. So what are test runs? Test run, the test run is a concept that, well, the name talks by itself. It means like, it's like an instance of the test case whenever you schedule it for execution. So each time that you schedule a test for execution, you're going to have a run that contains a copy of that specification along with the recorded results. And test runs, for performance reasons, they are not, and since they are not reusable, they are not abstracted as issues within Jira. They are internal entities. So if you want to execute the test right away, you could do that in an ad hoc way, right from here, by creating a task for it that we call the test execution. But normally you do this on a more planned way, and that's actually what I'm going to do during the webinar today. Finally, the link to our story that you can see is done using the issue link tests. And now you can see that our story actually, in terms of coverage, changed from the uncover to not run. This is because I actually have now one test covering it. And here within the test coverage section, you can evaluate the latest status of the test for some specific version. If you choose here some specific version, for example, version 3, it will only take into account the executions that you performed against version 3. So this is quite handy because you can quickly analyze your test results and your coverage on some specific version. Even later on, after version 3, for example, is released, you may be implementing version 4 and you want to still analyze the test results, in that case, the regression-related tests on version 4. And there's this environment field. I will speak a bit about the environments because this is quite powerful in Xray. It's also something unique. But just to give you a high-level overview, Xray gives you the ability to analyze your coverage and your test results on a per environment basis. For example, you can analyze your results for different browsers, or globally take into account the different results for the different browsers. For example, the environment can actually be anything that you want. Okay, let's move ahead and create now one Cucumber automated test. So Cucumber, as many of you, or if not all, already know, Cucumber is used for BDD, so it's a way for you to specify test scenarios in natural language. And with Xray, you can manage the specification, not the implementation part, but the specification. You can manage it within Jira. And actually, recently we had one automated steps library where you can manage your steps in a central place, and then you can use it as the means to quickly do autocomplete whenever you specify the scenarios. So in this case, I will just copy one existing scenario that I have, just to be quicker. And here what is important is actually Xray supports the editing of Cucumber scenarios and Cucumber backgrounds in the case of preconditions. And later on, you can extract this specification and run it in your CI environment against the code that implements each one of these sentences. Let's have a look at it. This is our Cucumber scenario outline. And actually, here, as I've said, you got access to a full screen editor with autocomplete features, because on the terms of a project, we store all the steps automatically as soon as you start specifying new steps. Okay, let's move ahead into the final test type that we have, which is the generic test. So you may be wondering, what is a generic test? Well, by exclusion, you can think of it as something that is neither a ML nor a Cucumber automated test, but that is quite obvious. So in fact, it can be used for different things. We can use it for example, as an abstraction of some exploratory session, where you can use this generic test definition here to put like the goals of your exploratory session. Or you can use it as the means to abstract it, to abstract some automated tests that you have implemented perhaps in a different automation framework, such as JUnit, TestNG, Robot framework. In fact, in those cases, this generic test definition field will contain like a unique identifier for the automated test. So, for example, if you import results from JUnit or TestNG, for example, we can do automatically provisioning of the test cases for you, so you don't have to write this down by hand. We can uniquely identify the automated tests based on the report file, and we can automatically fill out this generic test definition with something unique that clearly describes the automated test. So if you import results once again, they will be reported against the existing entities. And if the test case is related with some, let's say, some requirement, then the results of that automation will also reflect on the results in terms of coverage that you can evaluate on the requirement level. Okay, moving ahead into organization. So as I said, we provide two different ways. And let me start with the Jira way, the one that is most closest to Jira in terms of concepts, which is the task set approach. And the task set approach basically is a way that allows you to organize issues, to organize test cases in this case, in flat ordered list of test cases. So you can create a test set similar as you create an issue, for example, for grouping all the arithmetic related tests. Here, this list, since it's going to be an issue, you can add them labels, you can edit labels, you can also assign it some components if you want to easily, for example, find it afterwards. Then you can add the tests that want to be part of this list. So actually, you can build out as many test sets as you wish. It's just a matter of you defining like the criteria for those test sets. For example, you can create a test set by business case, by performance, by security. It's just a way for you to have a fully controlled list of test cases that are somehow related. So let me open the test set. Here you can see basically the list of test cases that I added into my test set. So it's a flat list, so you can order the test cases around. And then you can use this test set later on to quickly pick the tests that you may need, for example, for scheduling execution or even for creating a plan. So remember that the test set is just related with organization of test case templates. So it's not related with the execution aspects. There's a special use case for using test sets, nevertheless, which is, I think, also relevant. So sometimes, instead of directly covering a user story with test cases directly, you can instead link a test set to the requirement using the issue like link tests, and that way you will achieve dynamic coverage. So, for example, in some scenarios where you can have like testing outsourced to some team outside of your company, you might start by creating empty test sets where you describe like the scope of the test that should be created. Then you link them with your requirements, and then later on during the implementation phase of your testing, as soon as people start creating the tests and adding them to the test sets, the related requirements coverage will automatically be affected, so those users don't have to link the test by hand to the user stories, for example. And well, this approach is more, as I've said, is more close to the Jira concept, to the Jira way of working. So if your users are quite already used to Jira and keen on Jira using JQL and stuff, so you can actually use test sets and use JQL for searching, apply labels on them to quickly organize the tests that they may be relevant. But sometimes, especially if you come from other tools, you may prefer like a more hierarchical approach. And there's where actually the test repository concept comes into. So what is the test repository? The test repository is a per project test organization where you can organize your test cases and only your test cases that belong to that project using folders and subfolders. So you can organize the test cases by the semantics of the test cases, or even by, let's say, front end, back end, by high level feature. Then you can decompose those features, for example. So you should organize your test cases somehow similar to the way that, for example, you organize your own documents in your own computers, for example. So the organization that you make here does not take into account execution nor planning aspects, because those are dynamic. And for that, we have a specific way in order to achieve it. Then you can use this organization, for example, for quickly schedule execution for the test cases that you select, that you, for example, filtered out. You can also do operations over certain folders and use those folders to create entities or to have tests to those entities. So, for example, let me create here like one folder named webinar. I will just pick here the 3 test cases that I've created. I will add them to the webinar folder, and well, here I can actually do move the tests around, change their ranking, and as I've said, you can do an operation using the right side button or your left side button, depending on how you have configured your computer. Actually, we will use this as the means to create a plan. So we are now moving into the planning phase, to the tests that you wish to validate in some version or even in the scope of some sprint. And for that, we have exactly the test plan concept. So in Xray, as you are seeing, we split let's say, the different phases as different issues or within different entities. So there is no mix between the entities. So in this case, if you wish to define the plan, you should create a test plan. You can actually create a test plan, for example, using the top create action from Xray. Here, what will be important is that you assign this to some version, because the test plan will be handled as an artifact of this version, and then the executions that you create from the plan, they will automatically inherit the version assigned to the plan. Then you can pick the test that you want to be part of the plan. So, for example, instead of picking the test by hand, you can actually pick a test set. And in that case, it will Xray will import the test right from the test set. So that would be like the way for you to go if you are using, for example, test sets. On the other hand, if you are using the test repository for organizing the test cases, you can create a plan right, for example, from a folder. So let's create one, and whenever you do that, you are asked if you want to copy the folder structure into the destination plan. So what is this exactly? Well, this is also something quite powerful and unique about Xray, which is the ability to organize the tests in a completely independent way on a per plan basis. So each test plan can have its own organization, hierarchical organization, that we call the test plan board. And there you can actually reorganize the test cases in a completely different way from the way that you have here within the test repository. Because with each test plan is, let's say the aim of test plan is to track the tests status for a given, let's say, release. And in terms of execution, you may want to define different priorities for the test cases. You may also want to group them by, let's say, by component or even by tester, for example. So we give you this flexibility. So we can start building out our test plan using this initial folder as the basis to fill out the board of the destination plan. And then the plan, as you can see here, is basically a way for you to define the test planning that, in this case, for example, all the testing that you wish to perform against version 3. Don't forget to assign it to version 3. So what will be shown in the test plan will be the consolidated results from multiple iterations that you may create from within the plan. So the test plan will present you the latest status for each test that is being tracked within it. So no matter how many executions that you schedule, the test plan is somehow a high-level overview for multiple iterations, where you can see the consolidated results from those iterations. So in terms of, let's say, of a release, you can actually have one test plan for covering all the testing that you wish to perform against it, or you can create multiple test plans if you wish to track, let's say, independently the results for different subsets of your test cases. For example, you can have one test plan just for the regression testing and another test plan for the non-regression testing. If you want, you can also go even further and bring the test plan scope to the sprint level. So, for example, you can have test plans that are, of course, also eventually assigned to some version, but you can also have test plans on a per sprint level if you wish to track the testing that you are doing in the scope of that sprint. Since a plan is a test plan is a plan, and let me be redundant on that, you can and should fill out here some target dates for your plan. Since I've created the test plan from the test repository, the list of test cases is already filled out. And now let me open it. So here we go. Here you can see the test plan. You can see that it's targeted against version 3. Then you can see that the current consolidated status of my plan is that I have my 3 testing to do. If I scroll a bit down, you can see the list of tests that are being tracked within the plan, and within this column, you can see their latest status. As soon as you start having runs for each one of the test cases, you will be able to drill down on each test case and see all the runs that you have for it. If you have the hierarchical approach enabled, because that's something that you can either turn on or off in Xray, you can also see this. Instead of seeing this list of test cases and their status in this flat view, you can manage it from the board side. So this is basically a hierarchical view for the tests that are being tracked within the plan. Here, as I've said, you can actually create like folders for, let's say, for manual and for automated. You can move the tests, for example, to these folders, and this organization is completely independent from the organization that you made on the test repository level. And here you can see the consolidated results on a per folder basis. You can track the results here or globally. You can apply filters, and then you can easily do operations for the test cases that are, for example, contained within this specific folder. For example, for easily scheduling execution for them. You can also have a flat view to see all the test cases, no matter in which folder they are. Okay, so as a starting point for test plans, you can either work on the board or from the test plan screen. Basically, you can do the same sort of operations from in each place. In this case, I will create a test execution for my 3 test cases right from the test plan issue screen. And what is exactly a test execution? So the test execution represents a task for running a bunch of test cases against some revision of the system under test in some specific version. The revision field is basically something that you can leave empty if you want. You can use it as a means to identify like the revision of the code or the build number. But here what is important is the fixed version that in this case was automatically inherited from the plan, since my plan was targeted against version 3. So the test execution, this task for running our test cases, since it's going to be an issue, it means that you can assign it to someone that is going to be responsible for managing it. And then you can see here also a specific field named the test environments. So what is this exactly? So imagine that you want to execute the same test cases, but let's say for iOS and for Android. You could write different test cases for Android and for iOS, but that would be duplicating your tests without needing. And instead of doing that, you can actually reuse the same test cases, and at the moment that you schedule an execution for them, you can define the target environment. And this is somehow like a label where it can be like the mobile device, the browser vendor, for example. It's up to you to define what is the test environment. Xray will then later on give you the ability to analyze your test results on a per environment basis. So for example, you can see whether your tests for iOS, if they are passing or not, and the same for let's say for Android. Or you can analyze jointly, take into account the results for the different environments. In that case, for example, a test will only be passing if it's passing in all the different environments where you schedule executions for. But it's not only from the testing perspective, it's also from a coverage perspective. You can analyze how your user stories are on some specific environment, or jointly take into account the results that you performed against the different environments. And I think this is really great because later on you can decide whether to make a release or not based on the actual coverage that you can track on the different environments. Okay, if you want to dig down on this topic, please have a look on our short video on test environments that we have on YouTube. For now, I will skip the test environments field, and I will create a test execution without specifying it for our 3 test cases. Here we go. We can see that our test execution is targeted against version 3. And we can see that it's a planned test execution because it's linked to our test plan through this custom field. That means that the results that we perform on the scope of this test execution will be reflected on this test plan. There's an interesting thing that you can do here. As you can see, the test execution is an issue. So that means that you can take advantage of the Xray workflow mechanisms. And Xray can also take advantage of it automatically. So you can automatically do a workflow transition as soon as you start running the tests, or as soon as you finish running all the runs. For example, it can move the status to in progress, or it can automatically resolve the test execution as soon as you finish run all the test runs. Moving a bit down, so this is the progress bar of our test execution. Then here we have the tests that are that we aim to execute. You can see this this list, which is the orderable list. Actually, you can rank the tests now. You can change the order of them by moving them around if you want. And this, once again, this kind of organization, which was filled out taking into account the ranking that you had within the plan, is now flexible. So if the test execution, let's say, responsible wishes to do so, it can or she can change the ranking of the tests within this test run section. Another thing is that you have 2 levels of assignment. One at the test execution level, where you can actually, for example, have like a QA manager responsible for managing our and reviewing the test execution results. And then you have individual test run level assignees, where you can assign a specific run to, let's say, to a specific user, for example. So these 2 levels of assignment, they are really great. They give you lots of flexibility. In terms of bulk operations, you can do bulk operations here, such as bulk passing or bulk failing the test cases right away, or bulk assign them to some person if you want. In terms of execution, how can we actually execute our tests? So for that, we have to go here into the execute screen. You can see that we can execute them in line right away. In that case, all the steps will change accordingly. Normally, we would go step by step. So now I'm actually looking at our test run details. Okay, remember that the test run borns from the execution of a test case in the scope of some execution, and it contains a copy of this specification, as you can see here, along with the recorded results. Overall, in terms of test run, you can track the status of it here. You can inline change it right away from the top. You can also customize the test run status if you want, and say how they will contribute to the coverage of your requirements. You can leave a comment here. You can create a defect right from the global section here. and you can attach some file as evidence. But normally you would do this on a per step level. So moving a bit down into the execution details, you can see that this tail requires this precondition, and then you have the steps which are ordered, although you can execute them out of order. Each step contains like 2 rows, like the inputs and the outcomes. If you have attachments, you can consult them right away from here, and then you can specify the result for each step. As soon as you start doing so, the overall test run state changes accordingly. In terms of test step status, you can also customize them and say, well, they will contribute to overall test run status. So let's say, for example, that our calculator crashed whenever we press the equal sign. So what we can do here is actually we can leave a comment saying that it crashed. We can attach some file using the clipboard or by picking the file by hand as proof. And then either at this moment or later on, you can decide to create a defect. So let's create a defect right now, which in this case, Xray knows that it should use the bug issue type, because in the start of our webinar, I've configured the bug to be handled as a defect. Sorry. And then, okay, let's fill out the bug. Let's say that calculator crash. Here we can see that Xray knows that it affects version 3 because our test execution is targeted against version 3. And then we have the description with all the steps until the step that failed. This is something that you can either turn on or off in Xray. It's quite handy because it eases the reproduction of the bug afterwards. So let me just open our defect. Here it is. So you can see here our bug, and Xray can also create issue links between the defect and the requirement, the test case, and the test execution, if you want, in order to have more clear visibility of the relation between these entities. Okay, let's move ahead. Let's come into our test execution once again and see how it is going. So currently we have one test failing in to do. So let's say that our generic test, in order to be fast here, and let's say that it passed. Whether it was some exploratory session or some automated test, whose result you reported by using the REST API that comes built in Xray, and which in that sense is free, or whether you if you use some CI plugins in order to report the results from, let's say, JUnit, NUnit, TestNG, Robot. Then we have the Cucumber automated test. Well, actually, you can execute Cucumber manually here, but normally Cucumber is used in automation context. So you need to extract, first of all, the specification out of Jira in order to run its specification against the code that implements the steps that eventually is stored in Bitbucket, in Git, or in SVN or CBS. So we need to extract this specification, which we can do actually either from the UI by the REST API or by using the free plugins that we have for Jenkins, Bamboo, TeamCity, for example. I'm going to use the UI just to show you how simple this is. So this has generated a Cucumber feature file, which in this case I will copy into a sample Ruby project that I have here. And in this Ruby project, it implements the calculator that I've shown you that we are using for the purpose of our demo today. Okay, let me just copy this into the folder. Here it is. Okay, so I'm doing this by hand, but I want to show you, because I want to show you how the internals work. So let me just open the Cucumber feature that was generated. It contains the scenario outline that I specified within Jira, and it also contains some specific tags related with the requirement, the related test execution, and with the test case. So whenever I run this in the CI side, using the Cucumber tool, the JSON report that will be produced by the tool will also contain those tags that will allow us to map the results against the correct entities within Jira. So in order to submit the results, you just need to submit the JSON report into the respective endpoint in Jira, which can also be fully automated in a more straightforward way using the Jenkins or the TeamCity plugins. So let me just refresh here our test execution. You can see that now my Cucumber test is passing. If I scroll up in our test run screen, you can see the results for the different input values. You can drill down and see the timing of each step. If you took like screenshots during the automated execution, you can also see them here because we can process the reports from Cucumber. Okay. In terms of our test execution, the work has been done. So you actually can either set the Xray to resolve the issue for you, or if you want, you can resolve it by hand. So this work has been done. So each time that you want to schedule some tests for execution, you have to create new test executions. So if I now go back into my test plan, you can see here that consolidated results from this iteration is that I have 2 tests passing and 1 failing, which you can see in this flat list. And if I now drill down on the test case, you can actually see the result for each one of the test cases, all the runs that I've performed. You can also track these results on the respective board if you prefer to use it instead. And then, for example, either by using the board or by using the test plan, you can, for example, schedule execution. Let's say that your teams told you that they fix a problem. So you want to schedule execution, for example, just for the tests that are failing. You can easily do that by picking just the tests that are currently failing or in some specific status. Even you can pick just the tests that are failing on some specific environment if you want. Let's say that is our second iteration, target against version 3. So if I now have a look at it, it will only contain the manual test that I failed moments ago. I will now pass it in line to be quicker. So if I now come into the test plan, and if I have want to see this high-level overview of my 2 test executions, is that my consolidated results of those 2 test executions is that my tests are now all of them in the pass status. You can also track this within the test plan board if you want. Here within the test execution section, you can see all the related test executions, and you can also evaluate the progress of them. If you want, you can also put here like information such as the defects that were opened. Okay, in terms of process, this is basically it. So of course, Xray is quite flexible on the way that you can use it. In terms of process, however, normally we advise you to always create a plan for defining the scope of your testing, and from there create multiple iterations, as many as you wish, for validating different or the same test cases against multiple revisions of your code. Okay, let's move into the reporting part. And I will start by explaining the built-in reports that Xray gives you. And starting with the simple, let's say the simple reports that come with Xray. Actually, Xray provides you some, let's say, legacy reports where you can see all the test entities, all of the test sets, and all the test executions, and all the plans that belong to this project. So, for example, starting with the tests, you can list all the tests that belong to your project. Although tests they are just related with the specification, sometimes it's handy for you to see how your tests are performing against some version of the system, and this will show you their consolidated states, taking into account executions that you performed against this version on the specific environment. And likewise, you can do a similar analysis for test sets. Although test sets are just groups of test case templates, sometimes it's handy for you to see, for example, how the security-related tests are in some specific version. And you can do that kind of analysis using this panel. You can also see the list of test executions that you have. You can apply some filters, add some additional columns, and the same for test plans. But of course, Xray provides, I would say, more interesting reports. And let me start by showing you the overall coverage report. And this report gives you the ability to analyze, to quickly analyze all the requirements that belong to your project, how they are on some specific version, on some specific environment. And this will take into account the executions that you perform only on that specific version and only on those specific environments. So for example, here I'm analyzing all my requirements. I can restrict further the list of requirements that are shown on the chart. For example, just foreseeing the ones that are related with version 3, for example. And you can see, for example, here, because I'm grouping them by priority, you can see that I have, for example, 50 requirements that are major, that are okay. Okay in terms of coverage means that all the tests that validate each one of those requirements, that they pass in this scope in version 3. Likewise, a requirement that is not okay means that at least one of the tests failed, in this case in version 3. Then you can actually drill down and see exactly the completeness of each one of the requirements, and if you have like epics and stories, you can see this hierarchical relation, because if you do test coverage on the user stories levels, for example, user story level, you can track the coverage on the epic automatically, because Xray knows this relation. Normally I like to see this by component, because you can see exactly how certain components of your release are, of your system are. So you can decide whether to make a release or not based on this information. So this is quite powerful and something really unique about Xray, and I guess it's quite handy, because this way you can take a decision from the, let's say, requirement point of view for a project manager. This would be like really the report to have a look and take into account, because it takes into account the results that come from the testing. So there's a similar report, but that it will show you like the trend of the coverage, the amount of requirements that are okay or not okay on a daily basis. So if this was a real and a good project, it would be expected that the amount of requirements that are okay would be increasing until 100% of them would be okay. There is also the traceability report, which in our case is quite powerful. It's not like a simple report such as other tools provide, because we can analyze, as I've said, we can do the same report, but for different versions, taking into account just the coverage information for those versions. So for example, I am calculating my report for version 3, so I can see all the requirements that I'm filtering on the chart, how they are, taking into account the executions that I performed for version 3. For example, this requirement is okay on version 3 because all the tests are passing, because their latest result was passed on version 3. And here you can also see the defects. You can quickly filter out for the requirements that are not okay or that are uncovered. you can export this to CSV natively. That's something that Xray offers you. And if you have like epics and user stories, you can also track the coverage on a hierarchical way, because you'll be seeing that relation here within Xray. Okay, moving into more metric-oriented reports. We are, as always, pressured on time, but I'm almost finishing it. Sorry, Lisa, for the small delay. So test plan report, I think this are really important because, for example, the test plans is a more metric-oriented report where you can see the amount of tests that are by status, by their consolidated status. You can track the progress, the success rate by test environment, and also track the amount of link defects that are either in a open or closed state. You can also export this to CSV natively. We have a similar report for test executions. For example, you can see all the different iterations, the progress, the success rate, the elapsed time, the amount of link defects, and then you can jump into those if you want. And then we have the test runs, where you can see, for example, the test runs that were performed in version 3 in some specific version that were executed by some person on some specific component of the system, or even on some specific environment. And then you can quickly jump into the execution screen right from here. You can also track here the amount of link defects, which in the end you can then export all of this information to CSV. But there are additional ways to make reporting. And this one I think is mostly interesting for you guys if you are adopting like Scrum or using Kanban, because you can track the status of the user stories in your existing boards by including some specific fields. For example, if you include the requirement status custom field, you can see here right away that although someone moved the calculator, the calc3 into the done status in terms of workflow, actually in this case it's okay because all the tests passed. But if you had here, for example, not okay, you could see that eventually someone could have moved it into the done column, but eventually the testing results were telling you that actually the user story was not okay. So this way you can track the implementation and also the testing in your existing boards. If you wish, you can also include test plans and test executions along with their progress. As I've said, if you have like test plans in the scope of a sprint, this is a good way for you to track the progress by embedding the test plan issues also within your existing boards, and includes, for example, the test plan status custom field to see the consolidated results. And the same for test executions that you can also include in the board if you wish to also track them. And this way is great because all the team members, no matter if they are testers, developers, I really don't like that difference because everyone is working for the same project, for the same aim. So everyone that is working in the scope of the sprint can have like a clear understanding how the progress is just by having a look at the cards within the board, so they don't actually need to consult additional reports, which they can actually do if they want to go into the actual details. But from the board, they can have like a straightforward understanding of the current sprint status. Another way for making reports is by using dashboards, and this is the natural way for you to do reporting in Jira. Xray provides you some gadgets that you can include in your dashboards that you can then have for yourself or even share with your team members. For example, you can have the overall coverage as a gadget in your board to quickly see the whole picture of your requirements and how they are performing on some scope, on some version, or even take into account executions that you made for some specific test plan. You can also track your test results and see how certain groups of tests are, take into account some defined scope, let's say the testing that you perform in some version. You can see also the trend of the evolution of the tests in terms of on a daily basis and see the amount of tests that are either passing or failing, which you can also track in a tabular way. You can also see the trend of the coverage on a daily basis. You can also then group all the runs, for example, by assignee, by component, and that way you can clearly see the runs that may be relevant to you. You can make a listing of the requirements and see how they are on some specific version. You can see here their coverage status. You can track the completeness here and also track the amount of the failed and tests that are passing. You can do a similar analysis, but for test cases, you can see how certain test cases are on some scope, or whether the scope can either be a test plan or a version. You can have your test runs, the ones that, for example, are assigned to yourself in a gadget, and then you can actually jump into the execution screen right from here. And you can also list test sets, test executions, and test plans. And we do have some specific fields that you can include on the gadgets as means to provide additional information. And this gadget actually comes with Jira. And since we are using Jira concepts, you can take advantage of it along with the custom fields that we provide in order to have like a better understanding of the progress of these entities. There are two additional ways for you to make fully customized reports. And I will start by showing you the exporter application and what you can do with it. So let's say that I have this test execution, the first one that I created, where 2 tests passing and 1 failed, and yet you need to regenerate a report in Word or PDF or even Excel with your own custom layout and your custom formatting. For that, we have Exporter, which gives you the ability to define templates in Word or Excel when you put some placeholders there. And then you can export information either from one issue or from a bulk of issues. And of course, Exporter integrates with Xray, gives you the ability to have like a report such as this one that I'm showing you with layout that you want that may be relevant for your use case. Sometimes this is handy if you need to hand out some report to some management or even to your own customers if you do products for them. One thing that you can do also with Export is that you can automate this generation on the transition of a workflow or schedule this report generation on a periodic basis. And then the report can be sent to a Confluence page, to some FTP server, or even to some email. Okay, there are a bunch of reports templates in this case that you can then download from for free from our template store. There are many of them for, let's say, for test plans, for test executions, and even for making like a notebook of the tests that you select, for example, from a test set, if you want. And then you can download them and customize them to your own needs. So sometimes there is an additional need, or somehow a different need, which is the ability to define your own more table-based reports with your own dimensions and with, let's say, with your own charts. And for that, we provide integration with EasyBI, which is an app from a Latvia company. It's a powerful BI-like tool that is also capable of processing the Xray related entities. Then you can define the dimensions and build out whatever reports you want and navigate on the information that may be relevant to you. Okay, finally, and I'm just finishing it, Lisa, and just to mention that we do have much more in terms of integration. So we also provide integration with structure. If you want to organize like issues in a fully hierarchical way, if you're already using structure, this can be quite handy. But we also have integration with Confluence, for example, with app-wide go live if you want to have like fine control over your test environments and see what is happening inside each environment. We also provide free add-ons for Bamboo, Jenkins, SteamCity, and Maven, so you can easily implement continuous integration and continuous delivery. As I said, Xray provides a full REST API that allows you to manage all sorts of entities. And finally, in terms of automation, I will just point you to our documentation where you can see that Xray provides integration with many different automation frameworks. And if you come here in our documentation under the tutorials, tips and tricks, there's a whole section just for automation related tutorials. So you'll find all sorts of tutorials for all the different frameworks, all the different languages, also for cloud testing, for mobile testing, well, you name it, you'll probably find it here. Lisa, sorry for the delay, just handing you the ball.
Thank you. All right, can you hear me now? It seems that we're having some audio issues. Great. It might not be the best quality because, you know, when there's no bread, we eat something else. So I'll just start over again. These are some of the resources that we have available for you. There's a lot of stuff, especially in our documentation. I will be including the links to all of this in the email that I will be sending to everyone latest Friday afternoon, GMT, our local time zone, because we need to give Sergio some time to answer the questions that you guys have popped in the little question box. So be sure to take a look at our complete documentation. It's packed with information. It can be a little bit scary at the beginning, but just dive into it. There's so much to learn from it. Take a look as well at our website and our blog. Also follow us on Twitter. We're super active on Twitter. And some of you guys asked for our sandbox environment. I'll share the link with you via email as well. So we don't really have time for questions because it's already 20 past the hour, but thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll be answering your questions and I'll be sharing them via email. Sergio, do you want to say thank you?
Yeah. thank you, guys. So feel free to add some additional questions there in your application, and we will reply for you for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time today. It was a long session, but I really hope you enjoyed it.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll be leaving this on for like 2 seconds. That way you guys can pop some last minute questions. Ciao.